this topic, let's talk about the challenges of specifically branching SQL code in databases. In the application software world, typically we just make a branch in a version control system, we start writing code, compile it when we're ready, no problem. If we need to merge it, we merge it. If we need to switch branches, we just switch branches. In the database world, it's a little more difficult. Now I can certainly branch my database code, but it's not just the code itself that exists in the database. The code is a representation of the state and view of the database, but we often have data in there as well, and as we've talked about many times in this course, we've got to maintain the state of the data. Branching my code and making changes often entails altering the data somehow in my database. If I add a new column or I change a table, I have to decide what data goes into that space and how it gets there. I may need to add additional indexing, other structures, things to support these changes. Okay? Now, in addition to the code that I write to change my database, I also have code that manipulates the data as well, and I have to check that. But what happens when I want to switch branches? I can certainly do that easily in a version control system, especially with a system like Git. What do I do in my database? If I've got two different branches of code in one database, and I easily switch branches, so my sales table has 4 columns in one version, I switch to the next branch where I have 5 columns, and I switch back and I have 4. How do I reconcile that? What do I do with that data? What do I do with indexes and other structures? I really almost need a new database for every branch, which quickly becomes confusing and cumbersome for many developers, especially when you work on multiple projects. Now, having a separate database is a good way to do this, and it makes branching simpler in some ways to deal with the code. But it can become confusing for the developer if I have to switch branches because I have to make sure I'm pointed to the correct database, my code changes, and I have to understand what data is there. This can also be very resource intensive because if I have any substantial amount of data in my databases, that means I have multiple copies. Each branch has a separate database, so I've got a full copy of the database, another one, another one, and another one. Okay? So the storage requirements certainly can be difficult, especially when I get to a team of developers. The best way to manage branches in a database system is to work on one branch at a time only. Sync your branch with your database code, and then as soon as you can, merge your changes back to whatever other branch you need. If you have to switch branches before you've completed work, then typically what we recommend is you rename your database so that you know it's the name of the old branch, create a new database, sync it with the new branch code, and then work from there. The key here, especially with data changes, is that I have to merge often because I have to decide what to do with all of my changes. I wouldn't necessarily delete my branch when I finish merging to the master branch because I have to then decide, do I create another new database and merge back, or do I just keep it? I typically like to keep that branch updated and then regularly pull changes from other developers and merge them into my branch. This allows me to keep some separation, but still keep coordinated with what work I'm doing in my branch separately from other developers' work.